less than a year, our next guest on Rugby HQ has become the face and the voice of the IRB. He's seen as the man to take the organisation into the 21st century. Growing up in the AFL heartland of Melbourne must seem like a long time ago. He's the Aussie behind the steering wheel of the IRB. Brett Gosper was appointed CEO of the world's governing body in July 2012 and has plenty on the agenda. Not just the 15-man game, but sevens, women's rugby and an Olympics on the horizon. It's a huge job, and we're lucky enough to have Brett join us right now on Rugby HQ. And there is so much to talk to Brett Gosper about tonight. Brett, welcome to Rugby HQ.
Thank you very much.
First up, Gosper is obviously a very famous Australian sporting name, your dad Kevin, but give us an abbreviated version of the Brett Gosper story.
The Brett Gosper sporting story is a modest one and a quick one, but I played rugby, funnily enough. Actually, grew up in Sydney, Artarmon, in this suburb, for a little while and got into rugby, and then we moved to Melbourne, went back and forth between the two codes, played for the Australian under-21 side, and went across to France to get fit, to come back to try and make a push for a wallaby jumper, and liked it so much I stayed over there. So from 21 years old, I did about 9 seasons at the Racing Club, which is the top, and still is a top French club, and that's how it went. So I've spent the rest of the last 30 years in France. I was at the time the last of the Mohicans, where you could actually work and you played, so you were meant to be amateur, and of course in France there's a bit of fuzz around the amateur term, but I worked in advertising agencies throughout the world, in France, in London, in New York, and had this opportunity come along, and I sort of thought it'd be nice to get back into the sport of rugby, use some of the skills that I've learned in the time in the advertising industry and so on, and so here I am. And
what, Brett, what's your trip entail out here in Australia? I think you went to Fiji and also New Zealand this week?
That's right. It's been a pretty quick tour. I mean, It's been 7-8 days out here, a couple of days in Fiji. It's their centenary. Meetings with all of the unions who happen to be there for that. So, a day of meeting each of the unions and understanding what their makeup is and what their issues are and so on. A couple of days, actually a day here in Sydney with Bill Pulver, the new CEO, which was terrific to meet him.
And what did you take out of that meeting with Bill?
Well, I think he's obviously going to be a fine leader. He's got great experience in the business world, good business acumen. He has a very good manner with people. He certainly seemed to be asking all of the right questions. I think he's going to be a good energy. I really do. I think it's a great choice. And everyone rightly should expect big things of him, and I think he'll deliver.
And Brett, you've been all around the world looking at different unions. You've just come to Australia. What sort of challenges and opportunities do we have in our country with rugby union?
I definitely think it's the most hotly contested winter code market in the world. There's nothing like it anyway. I mean, Ireland to a certain extent, but then there's not the money in the sport in Ireland that there is here. So this is the coal face of competition for the code. You're up against NRL, you're up against AFL, and it's tough. And it's an entertainment market, sporting entertainment market, and it is a very, very, very tough market for all of the codes. They're all competing.
Talking about tough markets, you've just come back from Fiji, so I mean there's so many older communities in Australia now who play rugby. Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, how can the IRB continue to support those countries?
Well, we support them financially, above all. We've probably put £16 million into the Pacific in the last 3 or 4 years. We help them with to become competitive with high-performance centres, academies, find them test matches and pay for them to get to test matches to play in.
Because a lot of their players play over in the European competition.
Right. And that helps their competitivity too. The fact they're playing each week in France and England means that they're very competitive.
Saw Samoa beating Wales.
Well, there you go. I was there for that, and I was also there for Tonga beating Scotland this year. So it just shows that the competition is increasing, and that's the job of the IRB, to ensure that we deliver a World Cup that's highly competitive amongst the 20 teams that play. Good signs.
Love seeing those upsets when they occur like that.
Fantastic. Well, I sit there with the host union, and I obviously look very grim and say, "Gee, that's tough." But actually, we're the major sponsors of those teams, so they're good results for us.
Jumping back to your marketing background, I see you're a big fan of Twitter and social media. What's the you're bringing the IRB into the new era with that?
A little bit. I don't think it's any big revolution, but I think the IRB's had a reputation of being quite secretive, quite hidden away in Dublin there. There's not even a plaque on the wall that says the IRB's in the building. It's quite interesting. And I think when you're a little bit mysterious, you're a little bit misunderstood. And I think Twitter's a good way to message, but it's also a very good way to receive messaging. You get huge information from the fans and so on. You're in touch with the media. It's very enlightening, actually. It's very risky. You tweet the odd wrong thing and it all blows up in your face.
Sharpe's done that many times.
Yeah, I'm sure. Late night tweeting.
Brett, what about the Olympics? How important is it that rugby is involved in the Olympics that's coming up?
Well, it's a massive opportunity for us. A very exciting time for all of us. I mean, exciting time for rugby in general, but the Olympics is providing a spotlight on the sport. It's providing new careers for players. It's providing new funds for the sport in each country. It's a great portal also for the game of 15s. It draws interest in the sport generally. And women's rugby also. It's a huge growth area for that. So it's a hugely exciting opportunity for us.
How are you going to make sure that it gets the coverage that it deserves in the Olympics? Is there plans afoot to really pump it up?
Well, yeah, a little bit. Pump it up. But you've got to obviously maintain the integrity of Sevens. Sevens has traditionally been a couple of days, very intense. It's almost a war of attrition as much as it is a war of skill. But we will try to keep on air over a period as long as we can for the sport. And we might have the odd rest day. We're considering all sorts of things, maybe even extending a 10-minute halves for the games instead of just the final. And there's only 12 teams, so it's not as easy to keep them going as long. But and there are all sorts of debates on what sort of arena we're going to have and the atmosphere and how it should be.
It'll be a party atmosphere, there's no doubt about that.
It should be a party atmosphere.
Now, you talk about the challenges that we face uniquely here in Australia, and part of that, I guess, is the driver for some of the innovations that we've been able to manage within the game, both in the way it's played and the way it's broadcast. But you tweeted your support of RefCam when we first introduced it earlier this year.
Absolutely. I think all of those innovations, whether they be technological or broadcasting innovations, are great. But the ultimate test is if the fans like it. If the telespectators that are annoyed by it, you obviously don't do it. But I think anything that gives a new perspective and a fresh look on the game of rugby has got to be great. Good innovation.
It's been fantastic.
Really good innovation.
Great feedback and now being used around the world.
Fantastic.
Listen, I mean, I think it's one of those interviews we feel like we could sit for ages and talk. Time is up, but I'm sure you'll be back at some stage.
Sure, yeah.
And we would love to get you back on and have a chat.
Great. Well, look forward
Thanks
to that.
very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Brett.
All right.